Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much for joining our webinar with Larkin Martin. I just want to introduce Larkin really quickly. Larkin has become a good friend over the last 3 years. She's worked really hard to help me develop our StrongSoil and CHONEX technology on our farm. We started running some trials with Larkin a little over 2 years ago. She's been extremely helpful, sharing her equipment, her team, her feedback. We've learned a lot working with her. We still got a lot to learn, but are really grateful for those of y'all that don't know Larkin. She is a corn, cotton, soybean, and wheat farmer in Cortland, Alabama, and she's on our CHONEX board and has really played a huge part in guiding us to really understand what farmers are looking for, what farmers need, and I'm just grateful to have her here with us to share her thoughts on biologicals, what she sees in the market. And for those of y'all who don't know Larkin, she is a straight shooter, one of the most honest people you know, and she will tell you exactly what she thinks and how she feels about things. And we're grateful to have her here with us today. Will and Larkin, I'll let y'all take it from here.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you. It's great, everyone, to be here. And Larkin, thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, honestly, we're going to keep this a little bit of a Q&A, and knowing you're quite busy, I think that's going to be helpful. So we've prepared a number of questions, really talking about biologicals, what's driving farmer adoption, some of the economics and risk, as well as talking about the broader context of kind of soil health and regenerative agriculture. Excited to be able to hear your points of view on these things. So I'm going to do those questions. If folks on the call have questions, please add them to the Q&A, and then we'll reserve time at the end for that. So without further ado, I'm going to sort of kick us off and really just ask you, Larkin, to talk about biologicals. You know, it's a huge term, and how would you describe them as you view them as a farmer?
It's a huge term, and it's growing. And as a farmer, it's confusing. That's the short answer. There's so many products making so many claims, some portion of them very valid probably, but a lot of them questionable. And navigating what works for your farm and what will help your operation from a productivity or economic point of view is hard for a farmer because we don't have time to test as many as people are trying to sell us. So if you'll allow me, and just as most of you on this call probably have seen this, but for those that haven't, this is when I get asked this question at a Rotary speech or something, I pull up this slide about the biological world. And let's see if I can do this. So don't try to read this. These sort of diagrams are published by a group called the Mixing Bowl out of California every year. This is their 2025 diagram trying to list and categorize some of the biological products. You will see how busy this slide is, and you will see, if you can read it, the circles around the edges. They're just trying to categorize in some way. So these categories, if you can't read them, are something like mycorrhizal fungi, biopolymers, seaweed extracts, botanical extracts, microbial extracts, inorganic compounds. All of these products, and I'll quit sharing now. That's just an example, a visible example of the complexity of the topic. And this group tried to organize this year's landscape, focusing only on what they're calling biostimulants. So these are things that are supposed to help plant growth and nutrient cycling. They don't include what they did last year, which were insect fighting, disease fighting, weed fighting, and nematode fighting. That was a completely different diagram. Right. Yeah. That, again, to answer your question, how would you describe biologicals? From a farmer, the bombardment of opportunities from big companies and startups like CHONEX is overwhelming. And so I expect most of us are similar. We'll find someone we trust, we'll test it if we can, or if we're allowed to, or we'll look to someone that we trust in our region with our crops, our soils, our whatever matters to us, and see how they like whatever product A, B, or C. And I can't technically even begin to describe the things like the categories that we're on here, but it's an exploding category, and I'm excited about it.
Yep.
But it's hard to navigate for a farm.
That's great. But I guess, I mean, what sort of pull on that thread a little bit, I mean, farmers are adopting it. Folks like yourself are saying they're excited about it. I mean, what are the motivators for you as a farmer adopting this? And then I guess, as you see farmers adopting this, I mean, can you talk about what's pushing you to do this? And then also you've mentioned what's holding you back, but be curious why it's growing and why you see value in it.
So I thought about this question a little bit, and I think the biologicals are like any other new product that we try or decide to try. And here are our motivators. Most farms have their individual motivators, but I think the categories might work most places. Does this new product assist us with profitability, or does it solve a problem in a new and better way than what we've been doing? Any new product that we buy sort of has to go through that funnel. We're not going to try something that does not appear to either help our economics or solve a problem we believe needs solving in a new way or a way we've never had before. So it doesn't have to be biological to slip through that funnel, but a lot of the biologicals in my world are offering some solutions or promising some solutions for things we've not solved in the problems we have and don't have conventional products to solve. Give me to list. So our problems.
If you could list
our problems, and this is going to differ by farm across the country. Our problems, we identified one. It's not news, but we've increasingly realized the importance of solving our very low organic matter circumstances in our soils. That they're low CEC. We are trying to build organic matter to solve lots of problems about soil resilience, soil productivity, soil water holding capacity, sort of stabilizing pH. There are lots of reasons that more organic matter will help our soils be better factories for whatever crop we plant. Mm-hmm. Another problem we're trying to solve with new tools now as they come available, we've got, and I think most farmers do, pest resistance to existing chemistries and threats of losing registrations to other trusted and needed chemistries. And we're trying to find alternatives because we're trying to prepare for a world where the old tools don't work or the old tools aren't available. And a third move and motivator, and this depends on the farm and your markets, but there is a motivation to use less synthetic inputs to satisfy the requests of the supply chain. So there's sustainability programs in lots of the brands and retailers, and I'm finding this most on cotton. Although we had some canola this year and they wanted to sell into Europe, so they had to answer European questions. And European questions, whether it's for cotton or now canola, we've answered them both, are very specific and very European, and you wouldn't get the same list of questions from an American certifier, but they're focused on don't cut trees. That's one, and that had nothing about logic. If you've cut a tree since 2008, you can get kicked out of some European programs. Even if you've planted 100 acres and cut 1 acre, you're bad. But a lot of them are focused on reducing chemistry. And they want to say that you're on a path to constant reduction and ultimately elimination. And when I try to talk to these folks, I say, we're always on a path to reduction because we're trying hard all the time. But some of these things are integral to our production in our humid climate where weeds and diseases grow. So we're not trying to say we're going to eliminate, but we do like to shift to things that are softer chemistries whenever possible. And that, some of them take that answer, some don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, certainly supply chain issues are something we'll talk about in a minute.
Depends on what you grow and what pressures you have to sort of certify with an MRV. In the world of cotton, we've had some success, and that's a motivator for us for these biologicals in saying we're reducing this and this, or we're adding, or there are lots of ways to call yourself sustainable or regenerative. That's the buzzword now. When I first heard it, it was 2017, and it was on top of the Peabody Hotel and Indigo Ag, the high flyer, now not as high flying startup, announced the word as their sort of buzzword to replace sustainability. It's since been adopted, and it's a wild west of claims. But there are a lot of brands that use cotton that are really interested in it.
Right. And I think you're in a sort of direct deal, which you had mentioned. You can find it on the internet, which is great. And I think something that
we've done a couple. The largest one has nothing to do with regenerative. It has to do with being a female farmer. I'll take it.
Yeah.
But some of the others are very focused on chemistry.
Well, I guess, and I'll jump around a little bit on questions order, but we wanted to talk about kind of the sort of the tools you use to validate claims, because these products still have to work,
Yeah.
As you kind of reduce chemistry. So I mean, there are a bunch of new tools that are emerging. Whether it's sort of data mapping using GPS or satellite data. There's advanced soil testing. I mean, I guess when you look at understanding if a biological is working, what do you look for in terms of evidence? Is it only just yield, or are you also looking for kind of quality? Could you share a bit more about how you build confidence in some of these tools?
Sure. Completely depends on the product and its intended impact, and whether or not we are convinced of its proven efficacy in whatever claim that the product is making. Mm-hmm. So I go back to the motivators for trying any new chemistry, and the funnel of, is it going to be cheaper, better, for more, something will yield higher immediately would be best. If it takes a couple of years, tell us that now and make the economics of purchase and use worth it to get to some delayed outcome. Or if we're trying to answer some question for somebody else and it's a replacement technology, or if it's new and solves problems that we've never been able to solve before or never tried to solve before. When and how I assess whether I'm going to try something or whether I'm going to buy something, and I think a lot of farmers would answer this the same way. If you'll give me a gallon or a pound or whatever economic unit is feasible for, and let me try it.
Yeah.
And if I find use, I'll buy it again. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on something that I have no proof from anywhere is going to live up to its claims. So on-farm trials are really important to us, and we try a lot of things, and we have the sophisticated yield mapping data analysis stuff, and we like to partner with companies to try things. That's a lot of trouble, and some people don't want to do that. The other thing would be have neighbors, friends, or a university try the product and validate it. Farmers have learned experience to be skeptical of salesmen for new products. That's just a fact. Right. And these products are making some extraordinary claims, some very reasonable claims, but you still have to hear from somebody else before you purchase it without testing it yourself. I've tested it on the crops you're raising, in the soil conditions or weather conditions you grow in, and it worked for me to do X. Mm-hmm. And then you'll buy some.
Yeah. And I guess, compared to chemistry, oftentimes, the impact, though, of a biological can be more delayed. It can be kind of a slower process. It's not as obvious. How do you kind of think about that? I mean, developing patience to see outcomes, happen over time. Your perspective, and then maybe as an industry, I mean, how should farmers think about that?
It's almost a personality trait to be patient and willing to stick with something long enough if it does take a long lead time to have impact. And for row crop farmers, I think the StrongSoil product for CHONEX is one of those things. You guys have done great testing to show that the microbial life of the soil is enhanced afterwards and grows over time with continuous use. I've seen the testing. I've actually tested some on our farm, and I believe that. But we've not, and when we've tested it, and we have for a couple of years, you all are increasingly improving the formulation and the mixability, and I love the way it mixes with stuff, but our yields don't immediately always jump.
Right.
And so when there's been a difference, it's been positive, but sometimes there's been no difference. Sometimes it's been minor. One of the issues for all farming is that in a lot of these biologicals is they're conditional. They work best when something is stressed, and if you don't have a stressed year, it's like an insurance policy product for certain circumstances for some of the products. And they work best here or there. They work best in this part of the field, but not that part of the field, based on the conditions and the atmosphere and the growth and the weather the year you're trying them. And the people selling these products need to understand that variability needs to be addressed when selling the product to farmers. You can't promise the moon and then have it not deliver. You'll never get somebody tested again. But when you say to a farmer, this is a long-term impact, here's the data that we say that we have from third parties that says that over the course of time, and here's the investment you'll need to make over the course of time, and it will work best when you have a dry year, when you have a wet year, when you have a cold year, when you have a hot year, when you have this kind of insect, whatever you're trying to solve. Then they think, well, these people really aren't trying to sell me a perfect product. I'll take that bet. I'll take it as an insurance product for when we have these problems. This is out there to protect me. In our case, I mentioned we're trying to build organic matter, and one of our interests in StrongSoil is over time, how does it circle? What's the right word? Mineral cycling and fertilizer cycling. We use multi-species cover crop. We're no-till. We're chicken litter fertilizers most of the time, and then we do some really precise soil sampling and application of lime for pH only where called for. So we're careful about that stuff, and if we see StrongSoil or another product that is helping us with our long-term soil health, that's become very important to us.
That's great. And you kind of mentioned that insurance policy aspect of kind of like, more organic matter does tend to provide more resiliency to risks and, better performance over time. But yeah, it does take time.
We don't happen to have a lot of irrigation, so we are very risky farmers. And if it doesn't rain for 2 weeks, we're in a drought because our topsoils are very shallow, 2 or 3 inches in some spots, and almost none in some spots. It's been eroded by plowing for years on slopes. So we're trying to recover from that abuse that we did unintentionally to our soils. And so we're concentrating on products around soil health and practices around soil health and how they can combine to improve our productivity and resilience of our soils. Other farmers would be concentrating on something else.
I think that's a great question. And, kind of pulling on that thread about kind of that transition to thinking about soil health. And we throw around the term regenerative agriculture and all of this. I mean, maybe talk a little bit more about if you were a farmer kind of starting out on the process of thinking about repairing your soils. I mean, what would you start with? And you can be totally honest, of course, and I know you will. I actually know you will be very honest, so thank you for that. But how could a farmer kind of think about the process of transitioning? Do they start with biologicals? Do they start with no-till? I mean, what would be your thoughts on that? Maybe share your journey there a little bit.
Well, first of all, the farm would have to determine that soil health is their focus. They can have more focuses than one, but if soil health becomes their focus, if that becomes a limitation of the productivity of their farm, poor soil health, and they recognize it. Recognizing it is the most important step. And then starting to work on it, there are multiple things you can do. It depends on what you're growing. It depends on where you're growing. If you're typically furrow irrigating and need to hip up and do the other things that sort of water prone but very productive soils require in flat areas, Mississippi Delta being one of them, I'm aware of, others too, then your program is deeply rooted in plowing because of the creation of the water management systems. So no-till is less likely to be your first step, but maybe you can add a cover crop on the top of the hills. I haven't dealt with that system, so Sledge could answer the question better than I can. But if you're a potato grower, you can't do no-till. Carrot grower, sugar beet grower. But if your soil health is a problem, you can do other things. And so you look at your problem. And in our case, no-till helped us with erosion control versus plowing and then heavy rains. We have all these fields that are sloped. And so we held the soil with that. Once we got smarter and added cover crop, we further held the soil. And the living root things has been real for us. We've increased our organic matter since we've been doing the multi-species cover crop since 2017. Single species before that, but less seriously. And we've got fields where we've raised the organic matter from 0.8% to 2.1% in that time frame. So we're pleased with that, but it's not happening. So we're working hard. I'm rambling instead of answering your question, but if somebody determines that soil health is their issue, is their limitation, and that's what they should focus on for improving their productivity and profitability, that's important. Never forget profitability. Then they need to think about what they farm and how they need to farm it and how they could modify their practices and add potentially products like StrongSoil in a recipe, like a cocktail solution for all these. And practices and products matter.
Got it. So that's the soil health question, I think, is really interesting. And we've kind of talked about this over time, but there's that soil health and regenerative agriculture are kind of sometimes used interchangeably. Um, Maybe share your point of view on kind of is it soil health and ultimately profitability is kind of how you're thinking about things, or has regenerative ag been a term that I know you're actually classified as regenerative, I think, in certain situations. How can farmers kind of sort these different things out, or in your point of view?
Pretty confusing. I was asked to give a talk on regenerative farming. We were certified by, done a couple of things, but among them is a European certifier called Regen Agri, and very European, and trying to focus on the cotton industry. By the way, I found it a terrible experience, and I would not recommend any brand go there for a third-party MRV, but we passed their tests, and they were pretty rigid, so we were pleased by it because we weren't going to alter anything to pass their test. The test was kind of silly, but since we passed, we can call ourselves regenerative by their standard. When I was asked to talk about this, I looked up, because I didn't know this before I did it, but I Googled regenerative farming. This was 2 years ago, and I'm sure it's more confusing now. And there were as many definitions as I wanted to scroll through the Google search. Like, they just kept going. I think I went to page 3, and none of them were the same. The ones that seem to be sticking the most that I'm hearing about are soil health, careful input management, careful fertility, using natural fertilizers when possible. Some of them require animal grazing as part of a system, which is not practical or possible for us based on our field shapes and sizes and the need for fence and water. And so those I'll never qualify for. But we use a lot of chicken litter. Does that qualify for the natural? I don't know. Some do, some don't. It's not defined. In California, they're having a terrible fight, I'm told, over the organic folks thinking that regenerative is just going to be an add-on to the already organic standard. And they're very worried, I'm told, that the organic people, and they have an official rule book, and it's sanctioned by the USDA. If regenerative ever gets that, then that label will replace theirs, and the premium may shift because it's in some cases less restrictive than some of the organic standard. It is the Wild West right now about the term. It's all well intended, but it doesn't, like I said, some Europeans say if you've cut a tree since 2008, the canola certification, we had cleared a fence row and we're honest about it and planted several hundred acres of white oak and pine on unproductive soils. And they said the planting doesn't matter, but since you've cut a tree, you don't qualify. Like, that is not rational. But that was their regenerative state. It just depends too much right now. Yeah,
no, I mean, I think, and you've constantly kept us focused on kind of farmer profitability.
Farmers should be focused on their operations and their economic well-being. And I believe part of their economic well-being needs to be the best possible conditions for their soil and climate, because I think in the long term that will matter to any farm.
Yeah.
But our soils are our factories, and you need your factory to be in as good a shape as it can be. Soils differ into how much you can build organic matter. We kind of scratch in red dirt around here, so we're really worried about it. Somebody that lives in Iowa has got 10 feet of perfect soil, and they might not be as worried as I am.
Right. Well, and I guess, Larkin, just pulling on that a little bit more, when you talk about kind of profits and, at the end of the day, it's the supply chain, it's who's buying the product. And you mentioned it a little bit. Europeans are shifting more towards, wanting certain things in terms of reduction of chemicals. What would be, here's a big question, things are going to continue to shift, and I would love to know where you see the trends headed, but also, like, what would be, if you could, your ideal supply chain to help farmers in this sense? So I'm going to ask you to kind of, if you were queen for a day, what would you change? So 2 questions there, kind of where are the trends headed, just for farmers in general, what do you see? And then also oftentimes, what would be your ideal?
Well, today's answer to that question is that some legislation that's been proposed in Congress that encourages brands and retailers to use U.S. cotton passes and becomes law. That's the most important to cotton farmers right now. There are a lot of other kinds of farmers. It has nothing to do with soil health, but it would be very important for cotton farmers. It's a very reasonable legislation. I encourage everybody to look it up and support it. In the long run, I would hope that farms, because I think we have a social license to operate, right? We live in communities. We sell into supply chains that increasingly care about how we farm. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to be proud of how we farm, defend how we farm, explain how we farm, to continue the social license to operate and to create demand in the supply chain for our products. And if the supply chain is demanding reduced use of something, elimination of use of something, practices, it could be labor practices that they care about, not soil, but I think we need to be sensitive to all of those things. And instead of having body language like this, like, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, tell me how we can work together on this. I'll tell you what my problems are. You tell me what you're concerned about. More of an attitude like that. And I think over time that natural products will win in that conversation if they're effective. I don't think they're going to be adopted if they're not effective and economic.
Got it. So I have a couple more questions and we'll open it up and really appreciate your time. Talk a little bit about some of the incentive programs that are, helping farmers and maybe shifting things towards that direction as you described, the sort of better and healthier farming practices and more sort of long-term sustainable for communities. What are some things that are helping, what are hurting?
I'm not the expert on that. One problem we've run into is we've been doing certain things too long to qualify for newer programs that are trying to assist farmers to transition to whatever the definition of regenerative is. So it's frustrating to us, but so I haven't studied the programs, but I do believe that the nation and certainly the USDA, both in the previous administration and the current administration, recognize the trend. And this is Larkin's opinion, too many of the programs so far have been checkbox programs. Mm-hmm. And if you do this, you get a payment. Cover crops, check. You say, I did, you qualify for something. And those are well intended because they're intended to help a person transition. And cover crops are hard. They're very difficult to plant into. They can have their own disease and pest complexes that you introduce by having them in your field. It's not without its challenges to do that, the system that way. But they're checkbox systems, yes, I did, and they're farmer reporting. And I know that I have neighbors who try very hard with their cover crops, and I have neighbors who don't try, and they both get to check the same box. And so there are programs, they are practice-based. So you're yes, no, I did, I didn't. I'm hoping, and I've had some conversations with some USDA officials very recently, that they want to shift to outcome-based programs. That over time, if you achieve something, you do it your own way, but if you get here, you qualify or you're on a program. And I think that will be more effective in real change. If you think like I do, that real change would be helpful for the industry.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Larkin, I really appreciate these insights. I'm going to open it up to some questions, unless there's one. Did I cover everything that you wanted to cover right now? I'd love to get. I'd love to get more folks involved in the conversation. So if folks do have questions, please raise your hand or come off of mute. We're a relatively small group, so we can kind of make it a bit flexible. But we'd love to hear from folks that are on the call, what their thoughts are around biologicals or what questions you might want to discuss.
Hello, Larkin. This is Tom Cannon.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. I really appreciate you getting on here and speaking to just how complex the whole idea is of having, even defining what we're doing can be very difficult. And I also really, really appreciate and always have how to the point you are in the way you talk about, everything that we're talking about here in regenerative ag, whatever that is. And I love it that when you say regenerative ag, you say whatever that happens to be, because it is so hard to define. I think my favorite point that you had today had to do with profitability. And that gets lost so often. And we get a lot of stuff thrown at us here. Try this, try X, Y, and Z. And with all these guarantees and that are so shallow. The guarantees are from a salesman saying that this third party approved and says we're going to have, so many % of return on our investment. It's always on ROI. It's so vague. And so I don't really have a specific question, but I do have a big thank you. I appreciate you putting yourself out there. I know how difficult that can be. And I truly appreciate it. And I just hope that everyone will listen, that we're in our infancy. This has been going on. I also have been doing cover crops for a long time. But this movement, if you will, is in its infancy still. And we've got a long ways to go. And the only way to get there is outcome based. This checkbox systems don't work. And because, for one, they're not realistic and they're not fair, and nobody has time to go through all those check boxes and try to prove what they're doing. So I guess I do have one question. What technologies do you see that are either already out there or that are coming that will enable us to use outcome-based regenerative payments or carbon payments, whatever you want to call it? What technologies that have you seen that are out there that we can use to verify outcome-based results? Thank you, Larkin.
That's a good question, Tom. I have, for better or worse, I'm not sure if it's the right person, but our farm has marched along trying to find what works on our farm and not trying to chase a program. Because they come and they go. And if I find one that we fit already, or that we don't have to change, the changes required were probably good changes anyway, I'll be happy to jump in. Like we get all kinds of help right now for pollinator habitat. And so our cover crop mix includes a canola that blooms, and then we're planted pollinator habitat on some unproductive 3 and 4 acre patches that were too small for our now very large equipment to turn around on. And so we're trying to put it in ditches, and it doesn't take much, and it's very helpful to the pollinators. And so there are things we're doing that do check a box, like pollinator habitat, that also make common sense. I much prefer to see, beautiful wildflowers than pigweed in my ditches. So it helps. But what we're trying to do is figure out how our farm can be better, more profitable, more sustainable, more resilient from a business point of view. And there's a complete alignment with those practices most of the time for us, the ones we choose to adopt, with the greater societal view of what's better, more responsible, do it whatever you want. And I'm pleased with that alignment in general, but we do equip, and we will every time it fits for us, but we don't alter our program to chase that when it doesn't fit for us.
Thanks, Larkin. That's great. Tom, great question, and great. The appreciation of sharing these insights, I think, is also shared with you also. Thank you. Any other questions? I saw Sledge Taylor, you might have been coming off of mute to ask a question.
Surely Sledge has got one.
Well, I'll start with just a few comments. And the progression of your farm is very, very similar to the progression of our farm. We do farm over in the edge of the Mississippi Delta, and we do furrow irrigate. But I found that, of course, it's still a fairly low CEC soil and low organic matter. And but I found that cover. And if we have to do anything, we can just barely run a little furrow plow or whatever and just barely pull out a furrow. And I've not had any problem with that. So it can be done in the Delta, no-till and cover crops. I promote it very strongly in the Delta because it just bothers me every year. I drive down through the Delta to some meetings in the wintertime, and they've freshly tilled fields. They've actually put out a herbicide in the fall to keep weeds down. And every time it rains, the ditches look like chocolate milk. And, that can't continue. I don't give a damn how good your soil is. That can't continue. Now irrigation covers up a lot of mistakes, but I had a group here from Argentina last week, and they asked me, well, why was cotton so prevalent in Mississippi at one time? And I'd never really thought about it. And I said, well, I think basically because we had good soil and we had high rainfall. And I said, but with the advent of irrigation technology in the last 40 years, I said, that's expanded into areas that wouldn't normally be what I would call cotton country. And that made me think, I mean, we are running out of irrigation water in a lot of places in the world. And I think we better start figuring out a way that we can use less water wherever we are, or get by on less water. And that's where the soil health comes in. And, anybody, south and east of the Mississippi River, pretty much, and south of the Mason-Dixon line is dealing with low organic matter soil. And we have a disadvantage that it's warm and wet. And somebody in South Dakota, they're dealing with glacial soils, and a good portion of the year they don't have microbial activity to destroy. So all that to say is I agree with you 100%. I look for biological ways because I've seen the biology at work in my soil through the cover crops and through the no-till, and I see that it helps. So that's the quest I'm on, is to discover better ways to farm. And if I had a question for you is, where do you see the future of your farm and farms like mine?
From a survivability point of view,
Yeah,
from a practices point of view,
both from a survival point of view, and from a do we shift our crop mix, or where do we go from here? Do we keep growing commodity crops, or do we try to find out other uses for this land?
It's a great question. And if you want, I don't know how practical my ideal is, but it would be that we're pretty diverse compared to a lot of corn and soybean farms. Like, we raise 5 crops, and that's hard to manage and more complex than a lot of commodity farms. But that also is a risk mitigation tool for us. We can have a good year in one and a bad year in another, and prices vary. But right now, the prices of all of them are below the cost of production. So it is, without question, every single commodity we raise is below our cost of production. So we're going to have to survive long term. You can borrow your way through those cycles, and we've been through them before. But I'm concerned about survivability if that fundamental price complex doesn't change. And it would take new offtake uses for some of these commodities for it to change. There's a global oversupply of something. So I worry about that. If from a just practical farming point of view, I think, and again, I've spoken for diversity being helpful. I think hopefully we do find ways to grow different new crops, but it's difficult to jump into one that's technically completely different than you ever raised before. You have to have new machines, you have to have new markets, you have to understand new contracts. You have to have somebody to buy it. I mean, Canaf may grow really well on my farm, but there's no market for Canaf. We've discovered we can raise barley very well. We did a little test, but the one brewery that wanted to buy it only needed a truckload, and we would raise a lot more than one truckload. So the size of markets matter. And that's the biggest challenge. We can all raise different things. Who buys them and for what money, and how well do we know how to raise them is a question. So it takes a lot of energy to develop infrastructure around purchasing new things. As a dream for production, I would have built our soil's organic matter to 3 or 4%. I don't think we could ever get past that. I don't know if we can get that far just on our climate, because things decay and go away. But another thing we would do, we would not have huge, heavy machinery. We would have smaller, more nimble less compacting, scalable robotic technology. And some of our problems would be solved by effective weed control and very precise insect applications based on sensors and all sorts of things that are in sci-fi movies and being tested right now. Like there's a whole, if you want to go back to the mixing bowl, they'll show you another Venn diagram of the robotics that are coming forward. I've had 3 phone calls this week from teams that think they've solved the problem. Most of them don't look like they'll work for me. They all test them in the San Joaquin Valley, and they're all flat. And they're perfectly plowed ground, so the sensors only see green and brown. They don't deal with cover crops or ditches from runoff. So, but people are working on it. And so if I my vision for farming at scale, like we all do that are commodity farmers, because that's been the key to survival and margin, a little bit of margin if you match your machinery into enough acres. It may be a smaller footprint. It may be a more input intensive footprint. It may be a complicated crop mix. And the machines would be smaller, lighter, and more nimble. And they would not compact the soils that require the tillage, or they wouldn't use the fuel that these big ones do. And I can solve it in my mind for all in-season passes, and cotton has a lot more than the other crops we raise. I can't solve it in my mind for harvest seeding probably, but harvest is a problem. That's a volume-driven, efficiency-driven thing. But the rest of it could be done, I think. But I haven't seen it.
That's is that I would much rather have 3 4-row autonomous machines than 1 12-row.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to have the massive weight, as you say. If one machine goes down, you still got the other 2 running. I don't know. That's one solution. We do have a cattle operation as well, and that's the one bright spot right now. But I just in ratio to cattle to cotton, I don't have enough cattle to offset the loss. But it does excite me. But I've got areas that, of course, everything here, probably like your place too, at one time was farmed. Probably 90% of the ground here was farmed. It was rolling, good land. It got eroded. They quit farming it in the 50s. It grew up in grass, and then we added cattle to it. But I've got areas that have been in grass for 70 years, and my organic matter is percent. Some places maybe it's 4, some places it's still only 2.5. But to your point, there's a limit probably of where we can get. And really, if you think about it, most of our ground cropland now is up to about 2% from about 0.5% years ago. And but there is a limit to organic matter. But if I could get all my cropland at 3%, I think I could live with that and keep pushing it.
Be great.
Great.
We went through something the Soil Health Institute has done. They're doing it in different regions across. It's a national program, but they're targeting certain regions. They targeted North Alabama last year, and they did some comprehensive soil testing, targeting cotton soils, because they had funding from I think the Ralph Lauren Foundation or something. So all our soils rotate through 4 crops. So we have cotton on them, but not continuous anymore. We did for 50 years. And our scorecard was good. Like I was pleased. I didn't know how it would come out. We know we'd been trying. And we found they did a reference of a grassland area, an undisturbed area, and then a similar soil that's been in production. And we had several, and they said, so far, we were one of the only farms they had tested. They didn't give any reference for where or how, where our soil that was in production had the same soil health qualities as the land that had not been tilled. And I was, not all of them, like 3 out of 30. But the fact that we did that in a couple of places, and some that have been farmed for 200 years, pleased us a lot.
That's great, Larkin. Thank you. And so that's great question, great discussion. Just two more questions, if I could, Larkin. One, Sam Gray has asked, you mentioned some of these robots being tested in the San Joaquin Valley. Are any of them being tested here in Alabama or in Mississippi or in Georgia that you know?
I keep volunteering.
Interesting.
Where I farm, we're not a big enough market to sort of be the one they want to prove a use case on.
Right.
I did talk to one this week, and it's a device. It's a solar powered top, and it's got little hose. I mean, literally hose, not lasers, not sensor. I mean, they're sensors. It's a sophisticated sensor, and if they identify a weed, they chop it, and if they don't get it that time, and they have a swarm concept. I've also talked to one out of Australia that almost brought one here. But the gizmos talk to each other, and they're up and down. You set three of them cover 200 acres. I didn't tell me how much they cost. That's where he got to hedging, and I got to uninterested. But he's a startup trying to make money so he can get investors. So he needs to charge a lot right now, and I'm not his candidate. But anyway, they were 3 devices. They were high clearance. The videos looked great. And they'd gone to Michigan and Wisconsin to try them because they knew they needed to try them outside of California. They were smart enough to know that. Some of them are not smart enough to know that. They build these things that are about 4 inches off the ground that going to see in all the lasers. So they would get lost in the first ditch on our farm. And this thing that was going through mud where the big tractor tires had gone through after a 4-inch rain, and you saw it navigating like, wow, that one may work.
Yeah.
But and I encouraged him. I'd be happy to send a link to this startup if somebody could get him to come test their farm. Something like that is eventually going to work.
That's great. And I guess, and thanks for sharing that. One final question, and this kind of gets back to maybe pulling a bit specifically on the incentive programs. I mean,
yeah.
And then wrapping it up kind of back to the biologicals and soil health. I mean, which, if you could mention some of the equip programs that folks who are interested in soil health might look at. I know we've looked at some of the nutrient management plan opportunities ourselves. If you were to kind of maybe give a next step to someone who's thinking about embarking on this soil health journey, which are some of the ones that
I really am not the person to answer that question. We have not made choices based on government support.
Okay.
I really don't know the universe of knowledge. Now, we were in CSP, and when we were in CSP the first time, we went in straight at Tier 3. They reopened it. We were immediately at Tier 3 again, but we had to improve something. And so that's where the pollinator habitat came in because we'd already done everything else. So that changed our behavior. And I was already planting zinnias into it because I liked looking at them. So then they use their mix. But I'm not the person to answer. I will caution that what was the program in January is not the program now. And what will be a year from now has not been announced. And this administration is in the middle of rethinking and reprioritizing all those programs. So a farmer right now would, I think, if they studied it carefully, would find a lot of confusing answers or no answers at the USDA offices until the new administration announces their program. Again, I've had conversations at a high level about that because somebody called me to ask. And I was actually very pleased with what I heard. And it was this focus on 2 things. One, effectiveness of the software at the USDA offices and the broadband access. So the employees and the farmer didn't have to watch the circle all day long while they were trying to get through paperwork.
Right.
But secondly, the big shift to outcomes-based programs versus checkbox programs. I hope. I mean, the devil will be in the details. They have not been announced, but I know they're working on it.
Great.
And Larkin, one of the problems we have, and I'm on our local NRCS committee, but whereas it was our priorities used to be ranked more or less on a local level, now they're sent in to a national level, and they're ranked. And so you can't, if you got, let's say, cover crops. If you got funded for cover crops this year, you don't know that you're going to get funded for cover crops next year. I mean, I won't know until October if I get funded. Well, waiting to hear back from that. The same with some, like pipes that we put in to stop, for grade stabilization and everything like that. You never know, and you maybe 2 or 3 years before you get approved for some things. So it's really, I'm like you. I mean, if it's something that needs to be done, I have to go ahead and do it because I can't depend on wishy-washy rule changes and decisions by USDA. It's just a nightmare.
People will need help. Some people will need help transitioning, and products choices will be important. That's where I think some of the biologicals that do work and have good science behind them, proven science, proven efficacy. The USDA may either encourage adoption or encourage the outcome that the products will help you with. And you can choose the product because you want the outcome, because that helps in the USDA program. That's where I think there'll be pull through for certain products that effectively do certain things that are looked for in government programs. And there are a lot of people that really will not do it without some sort of process system.
That's great. Thank you.
I have one thing to add to that. I think that it's really important to find a baseline and keep your records really, really good. Keep really, really good records. Do extensive testing on your own. Because if we do move, and I think we are moving to a more outcome-based, even through the USDA, even through EQIP, a lot of things will be outcome-based. But you have to have a way of verifying a starting point. And I would love it if the USDA would give us some certain rules for that, just so we can get baselines down. Especially, I've been no-till and regenerative, so to speak, for 30 years, close to it. So, but we're still, when we buy a piece of property, it offsets a lot of the cost if we can get into a water program or a carbon-based program, which I think those kind of programs are both looking for the same outcome. I mean, they're so closely related, it's be hard to distinguish. But I really think finding your baseline is really, really important, and finding your baseline through some kind of third-party verification would be really, really good if we had some kind of a broad tool or set of tools that we could use to establish that, so that whenever we have the right kind of outcomes, we can verify that. And it has to be something beyond just organic matter. Sure, organic matter is a wonderful thing to go by, but organic matter can change for me by 30-40% on the season that I take it. So, you can, that opens up a lot of room for cheating the system. So some kind of a baseline verification process that is backed by the NRCS and the USDA would be really, really good to have.
I think that was Tom. Tom, I agree.
Yeah.
One of the struggles that our farm has had when we've been asked to get some of these European-based certifications for a certain supply chain, and again in cotton always, is they don't have a realistic baseline. The first one that came, this was 3 years ago. I said, what's the baseline that I'll be judged against for however much I use of this or that product that you care about? And they said, we've got a baseline from the UN. I said, okay, tell me how that was generated. And they said, it's the average farm in America. We know how much the average farm in America uses in fertilizer, and the average farm. I said, what is the average farm in America? Is that tomatoes in the San Joaquin Valley, or is that cranberries in New England, or is that sugarcane in Florida, or is that just corn and soybeans, or do you know? Yeah. Or do you just taking up? And they didn't. They just said, well, it's published as the average. So we're going to use that. I said, that won't work. You'll have to go to a region and a crop and find norms that are specific to a soil and a weather pattern, and then create a baseline that's specific to who you're judging and their crop mix. Well, that's too much trouble. Well, then your program's not worth it.
Right. Exactly. Well put, Larkin. Thank you.
I lost the argument, but I made it.
Well, Larkin, thank you so much for this. Thank you, everyone, for joining and so some of the great questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to the opportunity to have other questions there, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know it's a busy season. Larkin, this has been awesome. I continue to be very appreciative of your guidance to us as a company, and also your willingness to be very straightforward and be a straight shooter about what farmers, what we all need to be thinking about when it comes to helping agriculture and building products to solve those problems. So again, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for everyone for joining. Again, we'll be putting this out on the internet, so folks can also listen to it after the fact, or if you do, as a community, want to share this with other folks that maybe want to hear it or should hear it, feel free to share this link around. So Thanks again, Larkin. Have a great weekend, everyone. And
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Michael.
Take care.